All right, good morning. Looks like we're at the top of our hour here at 10:40, and so we'll get started running through stuff. We'll just do a quick kind of round of introductions here. My name is Spencer Pollock. I am a documentation unit leader. I got a few other quals. Day job is with the state of Wyoming as their Wyoming Office of Homeland Security Emergency Management group, doing preparedness stuff and EOC operations, but do some cooperator stuff via a volunteer fire department and have come out with RIST for a couple, 3 years, and I've been doing some of the virtual documentation stuff and some in-person documentation stuff for, probably 6 or 7 years. So feel free to throw in any questions. Hopefully today is more of a kind of conversational thing than a one-way presentation. I have a few slides I'll share, and then we'll go through some kind of shared screen stuff with some of the maybe efficiencies or best practices, some of that stuff, and then share a few resources. So by way of introductions, just to keep everybody's kind of time sacred here, feel free to put in the chat box.
17. You want me to do it?
Let's see here. Let's see. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm down for the 18.
Mariah, I think you've got an open mic.
Yeah? Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Cool. Thanks. All right. Feel free to put in the chat box. Just if you're new to RIST, new to documentation, been around at documentation a while, new to RIST, any of that just with experience. And now we can kind of steer the presentation a little bit. So without any further ado, yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
Nope, wrong button.
Okay, no worries. Cool. So yeah, feel free to put into the chat box just sort of experience. If you're new to RIST, new to documentation, and we'll kind of steer the presentation around the experience level.
Who is it?
Carrie, I think you've got an open mic as well. There we go. Perfect. Cool. All right. So we'll jump over to some slides very briefly that kind of talk about if you're new to the DocL world, just a bit of a overview on that. And I'll try to manage the chat back and forth as we go. So, for the folks that are newish to DocL, PMS 277, we'll look at that in a moment, is kind of the guidance document from NWCG. A lot of this presentation and the toolkit that this came from that I'll show you in a minute that you're able to use and kind of customize all reference back to 277. So everything should be sort of in alignment. And whenever you're doing stuff in the doc world, if you're not doing what 277 says, you're probably not doing it properly, right? There's efficiencies and tips and tricks around the edges, but staying in the lane of 277 is where we're at. So we'll run through this slide set very quickly, and then we'll kind of roll over to some other stuff. My contact information is here. Again, as we move forward, feel free to share contact info in the chat box, or zap an email to me, and I can try to zap an email back to everybody. Really, one of the things I want everybody to take away from this is with any of the IMT stuff, but certainly the DocL space, it's a team sport. We got several folks on here, LT and a couple others that have been around a minute. I don't know how many times we've emailed each other and said, hey, question about this. It's a weird one-off. What do you think? Or I'm just super swamped. Can you help me out for a little bit? And just kind of pitching in and helping each other. So do capture, emails, contacts. Like I said, I can try to get with Billy and Morgan and get our list of who is at this one and create a little reply all email group. See if we can get that done from those guys. So long story short, we don't really need to go over that. If you have to use the restroom, you're somewhere else, and so feel free to do so. We'll go probably 45 minutes or so, and again, as we go, feel free to chime in via the chat box if you have questions, or come off mute. We'll be in a more conducive sharing environment here in a minute. I won't read any of these verbatim, right? Again, this is sort of aimed at if you're new to the documentation space. What is documentation? These are some of the kind of copy paste highlights out of the PMS 277 guidance document. The salient point here, I'll say, is this third one. The IC is responsible for documentation, getting it back to the home unit. Obviously, you as the documentation unit leader have a pretty key role in that. But I always try to look at my work as a DocL is, does it reflect on that IC and the team at large professionally, looking good, everything's in order. When we hand that off, the IC can say thumbs up, right? They obviously don't check our work. They don't go in and audit and say, oh, well, you forgot this, that, or the other. But I always want to kind of leave the documentation space that, boy, if somebody did look or the IC said, hey, is my name, is my team being represented well? the answer should be yes. So what is a document? Anything used to support that decision is a document, should be retained. Obviously, over the years, right, as we've kind of grown into the digital space, that's morphed, right? For the folks who've been around DocL for a while, we used to get the giant plastic tubs full of paper, and boy, if a home unit wanted it, we were copying and removing staples and putting staples back in and all of that fun stuff. Now, certainly with RIST, right, it's a ton more virtual. We'll talk about some of the paper stuff if it pops up, but oftentimes you do get poked by team members and say, is this a record? Do I need to keep this? Do I not keep that? What should I keep? And this and some of the tools that we'll share with you in a minute here help answer those questions. So the permanent records versus the not records, again, this is a graphic out of that PMS 277. We'll break it down as we go forward a little bit, specifically what those are. FireNet is according to the 277, the best option is a temporary storage location. We'll see there's a few things that some team members or some units or sections will use, and we'll talk about how we kind of best practice manage through those. We'll share all these slides as well with you. We'll drop them into the folder that Morgan and Billy have, and we'll also share a website where you can download this and kind of customize it if you're presenting it to a team that you support. The eDocBox structure, if you haven't been in FireNet, or again, if you're brand new to DocL stuff, that little picture is kind of the basic load. We'll look at one of those here in a moment. But that's kind of the standard. And as much as we can stick to the standard and kind of the standardization, the better. So when we talk about this is where we kind of dive into a little bit more of this, the team dynamic. So you can see teams use a combination of processes. In a perfect world, we're all doing all FireNet all the time. In reality, right, our job is to support the incident where they're at, right? We don't get to dictate that ordering or supply or air ops or whomever do a particular thing. We can advise and coach and talk through best practices, but you do see a combination of this. Some are using all FireNet, some are using some of the channel process. We'll see that in a moment. Some use the draft eDocBox. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment as well. Some teams obviously very, very good with electronics. Others sort of say, where's that on button thinger on my computer, right? You're going to get the whole range of folks. And our job, again, as a DocL is to support that whole range of folks and make sure that they're successful. And ultimately, our box is a professional, successful, full record of the incident. Some use that combination of paper, Google Drive, others. The clerical units, some have those, some don't. And so again, as a DocL, especially in the virtual remote RIST environment, we're coaching and mentoring and advising on how folks get the paper in, and we'll talk about some of those best practices in a minute. And then finally some are good at naming, some are not. You'll get some that just say scan 1, scan 2, scan 3, scan 4. You'll get others that are pretty perfectly named right when they come in. So at the bottom line, like I mentioned, our job is to support the team that's managing the fire. You'll have a few of those DocLs that have been kind of set in their ways, and I really do believe we can coach, mentor, advise, try to get towards that base standard, but ultimately our job is to support them, right? And so lean in around the edges and be supportive, be useful, and we pick up kind of the slack, if you will. When we talk about those best practices, really we're steering folks to that general channel. I'll show you where that lives in a moment in the to be filed folder. You can walk folks through proper naming, right? I've had some teams that, like I said, come in and just are killing it with naming. Other teams that 213, right, or scan 1, scan 2, or whatever. We're going to work through that and how we kind of make that process work. Some of these are the things you need to be ready to explain to the folks, how you do drag and drop, how you do copy and paste, how you do some uploading. Some of that seems kind of rudimentary, but you'll have team members that you're supporting that aren't so technical savvy, and that's okay. Typically, as a DocL, we're pretty good at file movement, file management, and so be ready to share those best practices with other team members. As you go through the X, that's where we're showing that we've copied something to the final eDocBox or whatever. Be ready to explain that X process, and it's pretty well laid out in 277, and I'll show you an example of it in a moment. But be ready to kind of explain what that is, so we don't have folks scared that we took records or lost records or whatever the case may be. And again, most all the processes that a team brings to the fight can and do work. It just sometimes requires us to get a little creative as we go through. So naming conventions, we won't belabor this, but in general, it is, you can see there for searchability, eliminating redundant or excessive info, and trying to reduce confusion and errors. I always sort of use the base standard, but in the back of my mind think, if I was looking for this, or if somebody was looking for this 5 years from now, what could I do to help them be more successful? And we'll see a couple of examples. But generally speaking, the doc type, the doc version, the date, and the incident number, we'll see what that looks like here. When you look at some of the things like this 214, right, whose is it, the date, and the naming convention, we'll spell that out right a little bit more. But generally speaking, we use no spaces, only letters and numbers. You can use the capitalization, as you can see here, to make it a little bit easier to read. When we do time or dates, right, it's the year, month, day, so stuff will sort properly when you have file names. And if you've got additional things, several things, and you'll see the examples coming up, but you can put the _1, _2, _3, something like that. So again, it will line up properly in a search component, but shows that there's maybe multiple records of that particular name. There's a few exceptions. We won't belabor this. Again, you'll have the slide deck in front of you as we leave. GIS does their own thing. They'll do their stuff. We don't mess with their file names and structures. The only caveat to that is at the end of the incident, GIS will put together a couple of final maps that are part of that permanent record. And I do rename those into the naming convention that PMS 277 references. Like I said, with the rest of their stuff, their daily stuff, they do their thing. We leave that be. Supply and ordering have their own kind of naming conventions. We'll look at that. In finance, generally speaking, we just stay entirely out of the finance world. Occasionally, we'll find finance stuff that gets turned into the to be filed folder, and I'll just work with that finance section chief to say, hey, how do you want these records if we stumble across them or if we accidentally get them? Is that an email? Is it to the Dropbox? What is it? And we just kind of handle those as one-offs. But generally speaking, we stay out of finance. Here is, again, this PowerPoint sort of designed for a new DocL, but you could also use it. We'll show you where you can use it with a team. It kind of shows, in the command section, what are some of the pertinent records and how do you name them. This is, again, essentially the same slide, but with the red ones being the permanent records. So you won't get every file record, everything is a DocL. That just doesn't happen. When we're trying to get the full comprehensive record at the end of the day, maybe focus on the red ones. Certainly we try to get, as much documentation as we can, but the red ones are something we need to put a little bit extra emphasis on in hunting down or finding or asking about. We'll go through this information, right? The same kind of naming conventions, the same stuff here on records management, the red. As you go through here, you can see there's broken out by plans, logs, ops, in that same kind of construct. So this sometimes helps when you're talking to those partners out there to say, what do I need to turn in? Do you need this thing? You can kind of look here quickly and go, what you had for lunch? I don't care. Don't turn that in, right? But boy, if you have retardant drop tracking, yeah, that's a record that needs turned in, right? So it just helps you kind of converse more accurately with your team members. 213s, 214s, they follow kind of the similar naming construct. 213s, 214s, there's a spot, we'll see it here in a moment, where we can put all those things lined out by section, by unit. The caveat to that is the 213 ordering stuff and supply. They live in logistics, not in the 213 side. There's some confusion sometimes with that. And sometimes if you're ever in doubt, like, boy, this 213, where does it go? And it could maybe go in two places. Maybe just put it in two places, right? Again, using that little rule that if I was looking for this later, where would I look? If something fits in a couple of spots, maybe you put it in a couple of spots just to help somebody find it later, right? Don't go out of your way on that and don't duplicate records when you don't have to. But there'll be times where you'll find something that's fairly critical and you go, boy, I can see looking at it in two different places, like 213s, maybe you do that. So team responsibilities, these are things you can coach the team on when you're supporting them as a virtual DocL. Like I said, we try to get everybody into the to be filed. That's the best practice. That said, I've supported teams where they say, hey, we've got this weird Google Drive thing that AirOps uses. Can you go in there and take stuff out of it? You work with the team where they're at, but again, to be filed 99% of the time should be the right answer. We can talk to them about naming conventions, but really, again, when you think through it, is it easier for you to do renaming, or is it easier for the ground support unit leader who's standing in a tent in the middle of a dusty field to work on renaming, right? Again, work on getting them towards that, but be ready to kind of meet them where they're at. This fourth bullet here, we try to avoid the big surprises. I don't know how many times as folks' teams are transitioning and they're on their day, 12, 13, 14, and they go, oh, so hey, we found this box of paper. Or, hey, we're going to transfer 1,000 files over to you and we're going to dump them all into the file tonight. Try to avoid that. Try to work with the plan section chief on the ground and your RISL in the RIST program to have those conversations ahead of time to say, hey, can we take a dump every 3 days into the 2B file so you don't have these big surprises? We're pretty good at avoiding them. The teams know not to do that or know to try not to do that. It does happen. But again, as you're coaching and sort of leading up to the plans chief on the ground, try to avoid the big surprises. If there's an other process that's going on with the team, like I said, AirOps using Google Drive, that's not totally uncommon. Something like that, just have a conversation with that. So there's just kind of a shared expectation. I've had teams that said, hey, we'd appreciate it if you go into the FTP sites and we'll see where that lives and pull down the IR stuff, the IR maps and everything. Okay, I need to know to do that. They need to know to tell me to do that, right? Again, we're avoiding those surprises. And then when we talk here, generally speaking, as a rule, we stay out of the channels. That's sort of the gospel. As we're getting to the end, again, I'll have a conversation with the plans chief and say, hey, can you check at command and general staff if I need to go find any files? And there's occasions where where somebody will say, oh yeah, I've got everything in my channel. I'd like you to help me copy and paste it over, right? Or something along those lines. Don't go hunting, don't go messing in people's channels, don't do any of that. But again, do have the conversation. If you notice that, boy, we haven't got a single PIO record, have the conversation with your plans chief who can have the conversation with the PIO to say, are we on the same page and how do we make sure we get to success? So we talked around this stuff here, staying out of the channels. Like I said, if somebody wants you to go in there at the end when you're turning the assignment back over to the home unit or transitioning, have a very clear conversation. If you notice a big chunk of stuff's missing, work with the team to hopefully have them go move them to the 2B file. But what you don't want to have happen is you go, well, I filed everything in 2B filed, knowing that the plans people didn't put the IEPs in there, or PIO left all the images and videos in their other place or something, right? We want to make a comprehensive record, but we don't want to meddle with folks' work products either. So it's that fine balance, and it's just solved by communication. So as we get down here, you are the expert, like I said, on file movement. And so be ready to ask those questions. We'll have a couple of examples of IAP documentation messages that you can put out there that help folks kind of work through there. And if you're noticing, like I said, somebody that's getting way behind, those heavy hitters, supply, ordering, PIOs, some of that you just get a sense after a couple DocL assignments of what the pace and volume of records should be. If you're noticing like, we're not getting anything from this, or this just feels really empty, have the conversation before the teams are getting ready to transition. And if you're just getting dumped on, right, we've had those where, again, here's 1,000 files. Talk to your RISL in particular and say, hey, I might need another documentation unit person to help me, or we need to kind of negotiate timelines or whatever. But communication, again, you're hopefully hearing that is what solves the problem. So as we're closing out with a incident, this is where you're again either handing it to another DocL for a team coming in, or the last team that RIST is supporting, we're handing it back to the home unit. There's a few best practices there that we just want to share. Be sure that, again, all those permanent records are accounted for. If there's something missing, like, boy, we have IAP from day one and then nothing for 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have some more, go back and find 2, 3, 4, 5. Talk to the plans chief, ask if they can go find them and put them in there for you. If they're just swamped and underwater, ask, hey, can I run to the FTP and download these? Are you good with that? Right, again, try to be useful with how you're making them successful. If you're handing it to another DocL, either another RIST person or to a team that's coming in with a staffed DocL, make sure you do a debrief of who's doing what, right? There's always that day or two overlap where we're trying to not step on each other's toes, but trying to get the thing successfully transitioned. And if you're handing it back to a home unit, could be that we're closing it up and emailing somebody. Could be we're doing a jump drive. Those are fewer and farther between than they used to be, but again, they do pop up. You may be able to help support that. So again, just clear communication, clear expectation management. The final eDoc box index, we'll look at what that looks like here in a minute. and the final incident history files. I'll kind of show you where those are as well. Like I mentioned, if you're missing those permanent files, those key things that again will be needed in a doc box, do talk with that plans chief and say, hey, do you want me to go hunt and harvest in the channels? Do you want to do that? What are we doing to get this thing across the finish line? These are a few of the links that can take you out to get you into some of the things that PMS 277. We'll jump over there in a moment. If you're new to FireNet, the FireNet 101 video series is pretty solid. Some of the other resources that are in the RIST recording series over the last couple of days are very good as well. Like I mentioned, it's a team sport, and so reaching out to those other DocLs, like I said, I don't know how many times we're poking folks and saying, how would you do this? Or, boy, I've never seen this before. What is that? And so using the team, we'll come back to this tool in a moment. And again, lean on your plan section chief and your Rizzle. They've got a ton of knowledge, ton of experience, and they can help. So I'm going to take us off there. We'll just go back to the main thing for any kind of questions on the basics, and it'll walk you through a few of those other places. Any questions before we kind of shift over to another little section here? Okay, hearing none, and feel free to time it. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, could you, and maybe I missed it, could you touch on the difference between the draft eDoc box and the final eDoc box?
For sure. I will get there. So if you don't see that answer here in the next little bit, bring the question back up and we'll definitely circle around on it. This URL here, if you just go to this weprepare.org, this may be useful, may not be, just a tool. And then the incident documentation toolkit, I will drop that in the chat box real quick if folks want to use it or follow along kind of in their own version. It comes into this little spot here. I will walk you through both of these tools. This is just a little screenshot, kind of carve out of some best practices. We'll go over that. And then a couple of videos. And so if you catch something along the way here and you're like, how did he do that? Chances are one of these two videos, I think they're both about 7 to 10 minutes. You can go back and look and say, where was that little click box that we're going to look at here in a minute? You might find those useful. So again, feel free to use this. If not, feel free, kind of no harm, no foul. And then a couple of links down here to FireNet training, the PMS 277 is linked in here as well. So maybe a useful resource. I'll take you over to that document. That's the one that lives right here. We'll kind of scroll through that real quick. It is, again, a team sport. It's got a little table of contents, kind of tells you what we're looking at. But some of these things, when you're setting up the doc box, and we'll hop over very briefly and just look at the doc box while we're talking here. Oops. Where is my doc box? Refresh now. Okay. Come on. Oh boy. All right. There we go. Gotta love technology. Okay, well that's loading. You'll get the kind of base drop from the FireNet folks in there that has a set of file architecture. It may or may not come with a to be filed folder in there. If you think about the old school DocL where you had the little box on the side of your desk and folks would kind of dump stuff in there. This is that. You may have to add that. And this kind of walks you how you do that. You can create a folder and you can pin it to the top where then folks know how to find it. As you work your way through here, there's some ways you can kind of maximize FireNet. So when you look at a FireNet kind of base drop, there are hundreds of folders and subfolders out there between the channels, the draft eDoc box, the final eDoc box. And one way that you can really kind of easily set yourself up for success is coming in, changing the column settings and showing and hiding columns. And then you can turn on this item child count and folder child count. And we'll see an example in a moment. But that allows you at a quick glance to see if there's stuff in there or not in there without having to click each one of those subfolders and open it. As you kind of scroll through, you can see how we're turning those things on, turning them off. And we can then look very quickly and go, okay, empty, 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 empty. Oh, there's something in this one, right? Let me make sure it's in the right spot, named properly. Or empty, empty, empty. Let me reach out to so-and-so to see if they've got records or if they have questions. As you kind of work your way through, you can save that view so you don't have to turn those columns back on every time. You can save it as DocL view or something. This will walk you through there. And again, those videos on that website show the actual clicking through of that process. Oftentimes I'll have two tabs open, one on the PMS 277, one on FireNet. This kind of walks you through what that may look like. As we scoot down, setting your team up for success, I'll show you a couple other examples here that you can share with the team. Whatever message you want to give them, there's some kind of best practices that you can then just kind of print to PDF, email to them. This is just an example. As you kind of work through, let's see, we talked about some of this already. One thing that you'll probably find is that it's much easier to work on file naming when they're not in the Teams environment down into your file explorer. This kind of talks through some best practices of downloading stuff and making sure we don't lose it, uploading stuff, making sure we have it all fully back in there. As you kind of look through picking, moving, downloading, it sounds simple. You'll see here in a moment why we do some of that. Setting up the file explorer, we'll just go over and do that real quick. I've got a handful of files downloaded. We'll say we just downloaded this whole batch and it just says 213, 213, 213, 213, or whatever it says, right? And I need to rename all those. Instead of in Teams or SharePoint, opening each file, understanding what it is, right-clicking, rename, all of that, I can bring them down into my file explorer, just your downloads folder. And when you look in here, you can turn on this thing called Preview Pane. And so we'll just shut it off for a moment, right? And that's what you get. But when you turn them on, you can now fairly quickly and easily, as we look here, let's see, we'll just say, we'll make up a name, right? Thing one, let's just say that's what that is. Super cool. We'd be following the naming convention, right, on this thing. But you can just kind of see, for example, and then we'll just say it's 1, 2, 3. And let's say these things are just date 1, date 2, date 3 of the same thing, right? I can now just copy that file name, tab, paste it, Control V, come back and change this to 9, right? Because I can see it over here on the right-hand side of my screen, change this one to 10, change that one to 11. It's much quicker and easier, especially if you're doing a lot of the 213 ordering messages, some of the PIO photos, things where you can be able to see it and name it really quickly and easily. That's what this kind of walks you through, is how to do that, where you're not having to right click, open, look at it, try to memorize what it was, go back, right click, rename, try to rename it, right? This download into the file explorer can go pretty much more smoothly. Kind of walks through here. If you're doing that, it works pretty good. I try to do a batch of things that I've renamed, and I'll put a little extra folder in there that just says ready to file. And then I can move the ones that are named into there. Once I've re-uploaded them where they go, then I'll go ahead and move them over to a done folder. Just sort of my little way of managing what's been named, what's been uploaded, what's where. It may be useful to you to do that. The rapid renaming, like I mentioned, with the copy and paste, the control tab. Like I said in the video, the online video there, you can see some real time how we're doing that. The whole download, name them, turn on preview panel, all those things. We're doing the final audits. There's a few best practices there, right? Looking at the incident history file, how do we do some copy and pasting, making sure we have everything over. You can see some screenshots of how we do that. Again, I know it, without context, if you're new to DocL, this all seems like crazy, and you're like, what did I sign up for? It really isn't this bad, and those videos, you can kind of pause them and go, oh, that makes sense, or play along, work on practicing with some downloads, some uploads. As you go through here, let's see. This is a little spreadsheet from doing RIST where you'll likely end up having multiple fires to manage, and you're just trying to keep in your head, what have you done, what's updated, what's not updated. Something like this you might find helpful, that here's all the channels, here's all the folders, and then I can go ahead and put a date that I checked this, at this point it was caught up. And I can kind of just manage my workload then in talking with folks on the ground and go, boy, I've noticed you've had nothing come in since such and such. It just helps me keep organized between all the fires. Maybe useful for you, may not be, no harm, no foul if it isn't. But hopefully you're getting some nuggets that kind of inspire how you'll do DocL. If you do have to do a thumb drive, we can talk through that with your plan section chief. Sometimes they'll do a 213 RR and you can go buy them. Sometimes they'll ship them to you and then you mail it back. Sort of depends. You just kind of work through that. But in a perfect world, if you do have to do this, it's a conversation with the RISL and the plans chief on the ground and make sure everybody's sort of on the same page. Typically, the 32 or 64 gigs are sufficient for most fires, not all of them, but for most of them. Sam's, I think, has them 3 for $20. So they're not awful. But again, typically you'll either get them shipped to you or 213 or something. Chances of you being able to hit, when your eDoc box is all done, download all of it at once, you'll likely end up with this error TXT file. And that just usually means you need to go download the subcomponents, right? You open up the eDoc box, pull this part down, pull this part down, pull this part down until there's no errors, and then put it on a thumb drive. But again, if you get stuck on that down the road, feel free to reach out to me, some of the others, and we can go, here's how you might do that if you're getting that problem. I put a little letter in my envelope if I have to send a thumb drive back that just says, hey, if you have questions, I was the last one to touch this, something like that. And there's an example of this letter that we'll show you here. Any questions on that? I know it's sort of like I said, maybe a little bit of Greek. So we'll give a pause for questions real quick, and then we'll jump over to this other tool. Okay. Hearing none, if you come to this little link, right, and you click this little incident documentation toolkit, it'll open up your thing. You can click file, make a copy, and it'll be now your Google Doc. Do keep the comments. I try to put a bunch of comments in there that are the instructions. If you don't copy it with the comments, all the little instructions fall off. Hopefully it's fairly intuitive, but the comments may hint you around. So once you're in there, the way this is designed is you can come in here and let's just say super cool fire. The number is that. We'll just kind of work through. We'll pretend these are all sort of real time. You can type it all in. We can say today is the first day of the fire, May 8th, 2025. The incident management team is Looney Tunes. You can kind of see how we would sort through all that. To add, if there's an image in any of these tools, we just go insert an image, put the image in the cell, and then you can download if you have something or go find it on the internet. In this case, I pulled the RIST image. We'll upload it. You can see how we would kind of name that. So you fill out this one little section here. And then what that does is it populates all these other things with your info. So the presentation we just watched now has your name right in it. And when you do the print, you can just print these to PDF, show them in full screen mode. That's what we just looked at the beginning. And you've got a little presentation for a new DocL. Or if you're supporting a new team, right? Control P, your information is now farmed in here. It's largely that same spreadsheet we kind of talked about, but it pulled out the stuff that was strictly for you as a DocL and added a couple of slides for the team members. Maybe useful, maybe not, right? If you've got a team, we supported a state team that had never been in FireNet last year. And so sharing this presentation, they were able to kind of see like, oh, I kind of get it. The naming conventions, if you put in the date and the incident code, all of these are now what you put in, right? So you can use PMS 277. That's the thing. What we did here is just took 277, and you can see we just mapped it to say what your date was and what the incident number is. So that's again where I might do the Windows key and right, and then Windows key and the left arrow, and do that copy and paste, right? So as I'm looking at the file and I go, oh, that's such and such, that's down here in the communication area. Where is comms? Right there, right? So that is a repeater site documentation. I can copy that. I can come over and paste it in, right? You can kind of toggle back and forth is what we were talking about, or two screens. And again, it's the 277 naming conventions, but with your specific stuff spelled out. I mentioned that master doc record, doc index. When you're done, you'll kind of go through the whole eDoc box and you're inventorying it. And so, okay, we have a delegation of authority, we have a 201, we have a whatever, right? And then it inherited all the stuff that you put in on that front page. You print it, you're able to then PDF that, right? Print PDF, and then you can upload it. It's got a bunch of other stuff in here too. That home unit letter I mentioned with the thumb drive, I put that in there, and so again, it will inherit your information. A little thing on retention guidance, you can put in what it is. If it's a permanent file, if somebody says, hey, how long do I need to keep this? You can just set when your fire ended. Let's say it's October, and it was 2025 when we did that fire. And then you can say, hey, if it's in this little red box, you can't get rid of it until October 2045, right? Just a little thing if somebody asks the question, I've not really had to use that much. Just another little final records letter that you can send back with somebody if they need. That little tracking thing for RIST, like I mentioned, I'll put in kind of the fires I'm supporting, and then it just helps me kind of organize if I've touched something recently or not, or like, oh shoot, I forgot all about the permanent file down here when I'm kind of auditing. When you do the copy paste from, let's say, the IAPs that live in the resource folder right under planning. Now we're all done, we're closing out. I'll copy and paste those files into the incident history file, the permanent record, and then I'll just put the date there. So I can just keep track of which folders I've completely finished with. As we scoot through, you guys can explore this kind of at your own time. A planning P that's specifically for DocLs. What should you be doing? It's not as relevant when we're in the virtual environment, but it gives you a sense that if you're on the ground, what you might be doing to be useful. But could give you some other thought processes on how to, again, lean in around the edges. A little job aid that's out there. An evaluation, if you need an eval, if you're a trainee, this gives your evaluator the things that specifically a DocL probably should be doing, and then they can type in their info right there and print you out an eval. Those IAP messages I mentioned, here's a couple examples of them. You may have a team that says, hey, can you give me something to put in the IAP? You can hit print on this, again, to PDF, and it will inherit your email name, whatever. You can customize, tweak them, edit them, but it'll suck in all that info you put at the beginning. A few other examples of DocL messages there. We had a team that wanted to put something by the chow line, and so we created this. You can again customize it. Let's say that you don't want them to email them to you, take that one off, right? And then you can print PDF. Again, just a way that might be useful to the team. This little cheat sheet, you can change up some of this other stuff if you, let's say, I don't know, what's a good example? Say something in here you wanted to change that you don't like capital letters. I don't know, you can change that. That will then inherit all the rest of these blue things across. What this does is it's just a one-pager by section for your team, right? So it'll inherit the date, the incident number. It gives in this case, the command folks, here's the stuff we definitely need you to pay attention to. Here's how you name things. Here's some best practices. Just a little one-pager front and back kind of a deal. The liaison, here's what you should look for, right? Ops, right? When you come down here, here's the ops things you should be looking for. And there's one for about every little unit, section, all that kind of stuff down there at the bottom. So if it's useful, use it. If not, no harm, no foul. If you find things that are broken with it or that you'd like changed or updated, just zap me an email and we'll keep the one on this website live and living. Any questions on that? Okay. Yeah, Erica, on the toolkit in Excel, most everything will work in Excel. I think all the stuff works if you download it as an Excel file. The one thing that doesn't is images. Excel versus Google Sheets doesn't like the putting an image in one cell and having it go to other cells. Not sure why, but that's just the way that one works. But I can kind of play around a little bit more. We'll run through that here in a moment. Where is my SharePoint? So taking you very briefly through, we'll just use Fortin. This was a fire at the end of last year. So like I mentioned, when you get to an incident, whether it's virtual or in person, this is kind of what gets dropped, right? This eDoc box, these draft eDoc boxes that we talked about, and then this to be file. That may or may not show up. You may have to add that. Again, you can just click new folder, add to be filed, and drop it in there and pin it. When we talk through the eDoc box structure, take a minute to play around with one of these structures. I think there's a map in that toolkit of what it looks like, but you can see like logistics, and then you can start diving in here. It goes pretty deep, right? That whole thing of turning on those additional columns that we mentioned earlier, and that you can see in the little handout or the video, you can see where that would be useful to be able to look quickly and go, hey, in the food unit, oh, these are all empty, or hey, there's stuff in these, right? To do that permanent incident history file, the index, without having to click into each one. That's kind of what we were talking about with that. Rewinding just a little bit back up, the draft eDoc box that somebody asked a question on, they dropped these in here. I think I touched maybe probably 40 fires last year between RIST and supporting a couple of teams. I had one team that used the draft eDocBox process. It's reflected as an option in 277, and what that tends to look like is a team will rename it, super cool, awesomest IMT ever, draft eDocBox, and some teams will then put stuff in there. And then you at the end can go copy that out and put it back into the final eDocBox. And the idea being that then the next team that comes in 2 weeks later does another one, the next team does another one. Like I said, out of about 40 incidents last year, I think I had one that was using this process. Again, if you have a team that you're supporting that's doing that, that's just fine. No harm, no foul. But it does mean you need to go through each of these folders and see if they have files in there and then get them copied over. That little add, do the column thing that we talked about. Let's see. Column settings, show hide columns. And then, like I said, turning on this item, child count and folder child count. We'll hit apply. And then, like I said, I can save that as a view. So when you come up here and you kind of click the little drop down, I've got a DocL view, right? I added that before this. So long story short, if you are using the draft eDocBox, I highly recommend turning those things on because now we can come into the resource advisor folder, 0 and 0, there's nothing in there. I can use my Alt left arrow to go back, my 0, 0, 0, 0, right? 0, 0, 0, 0. It just makes it much faster than having to click into each one of those subfolders and double check that there's stuff there. Let's just kind of, if there's anything else there. Those are the high points. You'll have some teams that typically when it comes into to be filed, we just move it to where it goes in the eDocBox after we properly named it, whether we downloaded it, named it, put it back, or if it was already properly named, just moved it over. I had one team last year that wanted to keep a copy in here, and so they could see what had been turned in and what hadn't without having to go into the final eDocBox. And so I just put them in here, put the X at the beginning of the file name. That's referenced in 277 of why we do that. But then at a glance, the team can see, oh yeah, we already turned all this stuff in, and it's been copied into the final eDocBox. Those are the high points. I'll go to just kind of open forum Q&A, or if anyone's got any thoughts or comments, and I will run through to see if we've got any questions here in the chat box. But yeah, feel free to hop in if you've got something to add or a question or whatever. You do DocL. Hey, John.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for like Excel spreadsheets, is like we're using DMOB, right? Virtual DMOB stuff now. So spreadsheets for check-in as well. We're going away from the 221s now. There's more of a spreadsheet. How do we still file those, or how do we? What's the best way to handle those?
Yeah, great question. So typically I will, as we're kind of getting to that closeout time, that day 12, 13, 14, I'll tie in with the folks that use those. So status check-in, DMOB, resource unit leader, and say, hey, can you do me the print to PDF, if you will, or the Excel file? Typically print to PDF, because if you move those files that are linked to something like a link tree, you will dork up the ability for new stuff to come in. So I will typically have them print the PDF, name it that day 13 or whatever, and then put that PDF archive, if you will, into where it goes in the DocBox. But yeah, do be careful if it's linked to something, and we're seeing a lot more of that with the Power Automates and the forms. Do not mess with that live file. We've broken those by accident over the years, and obviously that's not a great thing for you, the team, anyone else that has to undo that. So print PDF, but I usually coach that status check and that resource and that DMOB person on that I need that before they take off. Okay, any others? Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Megan.
Hi, I have a couple questions as a newbie here.
Yeah.
Two questions. So when you were on site, I've been reading through kind of the DocL documentation and textbook stuff, and wondering when you're on site, should you be prepared to bring kind of a scanner and or printer with you? And also, when you're working with the RIST, how does it work? What is the workflow like to work with paper documents that would be on site?
Okay, great question. Yeah, so my Go kit, if you will, I support a couple of teams here in the Rocky Mountain area, and I do bring a little scanner, not a printer. It's just I don't even know what it's called. If you go to Amazon and type in, scanner thing, it's about yay big. Sits on the desktop. That does help. I've had a few where also as a DocL in the wintertime, I've closed out for teams and they said, I got this box of paper as a home unit. Can you make it digital? And that little high-speed scanner works pretty good for that. If you are remote with RIST and the plans chief says, hey, we got a box of paper. Some of them will have a clerical unit, right? If folks haven't been out, that's a semi-trailer RV type thing full of copy machines and a couple of college kids is typically what those look like. And you can work with the plans chief and the clerical unit. We've done it a few different ways to say, hey, look, bring them in there, scan them. Sometimes the clerical unit will give it a rudimentary name that I just have to clean up. Other times there is no clerical unit, and so we'll just talk to the folks on the ground and say, if somebody's got a scanner, or if there's one at the forest office or whatever, can you run this stuff through? Preferably one document per file. We can break them apart in PDF, but that adds a whole extra step. And then just send me the scan 1, scan 2, scan 3. I'll download them and then kind of do that control, copy, paste, naming convention where we can go fairly quickly. But yeah, it's definitely a conversation. I do ask that right up front when I take on a new team. Are there people generating paper records? And if so, do you expect us to try to manage that process? Because like I said, if you get to day 13 and then they go, oh yeah, a box of paper, by the time you're getting this stuff digitized, they're already gone. And so yeah, ask that question kind of up front. But yeah, typically we just use the clerical unit and they've got the name close, and then I've cleaned up the name and put it where it goes.
Thank you so much.
For sure. Mark, you had a question in the chat box. What do you mean used to? I mean, if you can clarify that a little bit, we can try to answer it. Any other questions while we're having Mark chimed in? Erica, yep, it's typically all electronic now. Again, the old days we would have the boxes and boxes of paper, and then the home unit would say, I want 2 copies. Our county wants 1, and we would go paper by paper, file, copy, and build essentially the second record box. Now we've digitized just about all of it. So yeah, you may have paper on the ground, but by the end of it, we should have it all electronic. Yep, scanned and uploaded. There you go. I'll let some of our Forest Service folks kind of chime in specifically on the pinion. That typically is a after us process. That's a home unit function. We'll have it ready to go. Like I said, whether it's on the thumb drive or here's the access to the Teams channel. But the pinion thing is an after us process. We don't end up doing that. Yep, Dylan, go ahead.
Yeah, hey Spencer, great presentation. And really cool to see your tools as well, and kind of see how the PMS 277 is evolving. One thing, just a little clarification I did want to point out, there is a July 2024 PMS 277. Really the only difference is that includes the ISAP and Air Resource Advisor reports in the Master Documentation Index. But I just want folks to realize that there is a new version. But yeah, great presentation and great explanation of kind of the processes that we've set up with that. And I just wanted to say too, from the NWCG side, if anybody's ever got feedback on the PMS 277, there is a feedback process that we have on the Incident Planning Subcommittee website. And by all means, please provide that feedback so we can continue to develop the product. But yeah, good job, Spencer. I just want to kind of say that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Yep. And here's what he was talking about there, right? There's that ISAP that's been added, right? And then the subsequent folders inside the eDoc box. I think I updated this last summer, but I wouldn't swear to it. So I'll go back and double check that it is. I think I got it updated, but I will confirm that it does match yeah, it is. I might not have written it down, but yeah, it is pulled in there with the ISAP and the naming conventions and all that should be in the tool now. So
yep, perfect. And then their resource advisor reports too. That was kind of a big one from the ARA side.
Yep, 100%. Very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent job, Spencer.
Perfect, thank you. Yep, Belinda, good point. Yep, if you've got a process that works like those draft docs, because that does get confusing. I think with Cameron Peak in Colorado back in 2020, we had, 11 teams, something like that. and different levels of documentation support through the 11 teams. And we had a handful of RIST folks that came in December, and 3 or 4 of us started working through draft eDoc boxes, channels, all that stuff. And so, yeah, if it's a tool that works for you, heck yes. Belinda, you got your hand up as well?
I just wanted to make a comment that almost all of my 214s from ops are all usually done by hand, and I make sure that I have those and get them scanned because a lot of the field people are just using the one that's in the IAP.
Yep.
Thank you.
100%. And a ton of 213 messages will be that, be paper versions. A ton of ground support stuff, right? Obviously, they're sitting in the field or paper. And so if you need, I think one of those IAP messages talks about that. You can use whatever app you want, but the CAM scanner, CAM scanner, tends to be a pretty good one. You can encourage that if there's somebody on the ground, you snap a picture with CAM scanner and then upload it, and then we can name it and put it where it goes and all that stuff. But or, right, you talk to somebody on the ground and say, hey, can you put a paper box there to be turned in for things like 214s, and then have somebody run them through the scanner at night for you. Yep, great point.
For
cool.
those who
have,
those who have iPhones, we use Notes, so I have distributed those instructions to all my sections.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and that's the nice part about like this with the and like I said, I'll try to see if I can get this email group from Morgan and Billy and have that reply all. And so when you have a best practice like that, reply all, hey, we knew this or the other, right? And we just all kind of build our collective toolboxes. So cool. Anything else? Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
So I have 2 questions. I've worked with in doing the DOCL stuff as a plan section sheet type 3, but I've never done the handoff before. Can you clarify in the beginning you said that the IC is the one that receives it? How does that process kind of go? And then also I've seen it in the past also where a dispatch center takes the final document. So can you clarify what the home unit is? Is it the forest or unit they're actually working on, or is it dispatch, or is it a combination kind of thing?
Yeah, good question. It can be all of the above, right? That's kind of a sucky cop-out answer. But I do try to, when I tie in with that kind of first meeting with the plans chief, if I'm supporting him virtually, say, hey, when you get a chance at CNG or something, can you talk to the IC or the AREP or the AA, whatever that kind of looks like, and ask for that clarification on expectations. Because we have supported all of those, that some of them like, oh yeah, the home unit being the forest, or we've done some county support from the type 3 level incidents where you're sending it back to a local county fire warden, or right to a dispatch center. And so I'll just ask for that clarity up front. I don't call the IC, right? I'll just kind of use my chain of command and poke the, like I said, the plans chief that when they see the IC or the AREP or the AA or whatever it is, convenient. And if I haven't heard back an answer by maybe day 4, 5, 6, 7, I'll poke the plans chief again and just say, hey, just want to clarify, make sure we're meeting expectations. Could you try to get an answer on what does the end look like? And then oftentimes I end up handling that, that if they say, hey, yeah, send it to so-and-so, I'll take care of that. And then I'll CC the IC and the plans chief and the RISL just to make sure that they all see that the loop is closed. Because oftentimes, and I should have clarified that, it'd be nice if on day 14, all the stuff is in and we're done and thumbs up, we're good. But a lot of times we end up that everybody's gone at day 14, right? And then day 15, 16, you'll have a few of those things as folks get home like, oh, shoot, I forgot to upload such and such. And so I usually, if I'm handing something back, whether it's a thumb drive or my email that says, hey, we're all done, your package should be final, I'll usually wait a couple days after the team is transitioned just to make sure we've got that full comprehensive package. And then I'll send my email or my thumb drive or whatever the case may be to wherever I got guidance from that IC on. Cool. Anything else? Okay, well, welcome to RIST and DocL for the folks. A lot of new folks, which is great. DocL has always been one of those that seems like it's been hard to fill over the years, and so seeing some new interest and new folks in this is awesome. RIST is awesome. If you've got questions on that, I think you've heard from some of the Rizzles, Joey, Brandon, Connie, Morgan. That whole crew has just been super good to work with. So again, reach out if you got training questions or whatever down the road. Feel free to do the reply all emails or whatnot. And we'll look forward to seeing you out there in the summer. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.